Hey everyone, welcome back to the garage. If you're like me, you may have had some projects that involved stainless steel and the only thing you had available to you was a Flux Core Welder. And in this video we are going to go over a couple different ways that you can weld stainless steel with your Flux Core machine and some of the things to watch out for while you do that. So the first way to be able to weld stainless steel with your Flux Core machine is just to use your regular mild steel Flux Core wire. That's perfectly okay. It's going to work fine and it'll weld it together. However, one thing you do need to watch out for is the fact that the weld itself will rust, and then any spatter you get on the piece that you're working on is going to start developing rust as well. So if you're going to be doing any sort of exhaust work, you may not want to use your mild steel wire. However, if you're doing some silverware art, scrap art, or any yard art type projects, you may like that rusted look, and the mild steel wire is going to do just fine in those situations. So for instance, I've welded a few of these birds out of silverware, and on some of them I have used regular mild steel wire, and you can tell in here that it has started to rust, and I'm perfectly okay with that. Now on this one I've used the stainless wire, and there is no rust developing on this bird. The rest of this is not stainless, so it has started to patina and rust a little bit. So your first option, mild steel, we covered that a little bit. The second option is to buy a spool of stainless steel Flux Core wire. Now this is a thing they make. It is a little bit pricey compared to the mild steel wire. However, it's constructed exactly the same. You've got a flux core center with your metal around it, and in this case that is stainless, and this will give you a weld that will not rust. So if you've got a project like exhaust work where not having rust is important, then this would be the way to go. Now a couple of things to keep in mind with this wire is the fact that, number one, it is definitely more stiff and springy than your mild steel wire. And I've also found that you tend to need to run your machine a little bit hotter than the suggested settings. This wire likes to be run hot compared to mild steel. One other thing to keep in mind is that the stainless wire still will have slag and soot and things on it that needs to be cleaned off. You've got to be mindful of how you clean it off in order to preserve the finish of your final product, if that is important. You don't want to use anything real aggressive because the stainless is going to scratch pretty easily. Now if you're going to paint the projects when you're done, it's not that big of a deal. So what I'm going to do next is I've got some forks here. I typically use a lot of stainless when it comes to making silverware art, like these birds and other little animals and things. So a lot of the stainless I've got right now is silverware. It's cheap and plentiful at your Goodwills and thrift stores. So if you want to practice on stainless, that's a good place to look for silverware. I think they run about 10 cents a piece, and there's usually plenty of it at a thrift store. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first weld one set, do a couple little welds with the regular mild steel wire. That's going to be set up in the Simder MIG 140. And then I'm going to load this spool, because I only have one, into the titanium 125, and we'll do a couple welds with that, and then at the end we will see what they look like. Alright, so here comes the regular mild steel wire in the Simder MIG 140. So I got the Blue Demon stainless wire loaded up in this titanium 125. Do a couple test welds, and then when we're done, we'll come in close and take a look at both of these. Alright guys, so This set of forks on my right, your left, is the stainless steel flux core. This is the mild steel. So as you can see, I didn't get a great result. I mean, these forks are definitely welded together, but the welds look a little messy. And this wire is just in general difficult to deal with. I'm sure you could tell from the video. There's a lot more popping, there's a lot more spatter. And on top of that, I was having some feeding issues. The stiffness and the springiness of this wire makes it a little more difficult to use, especially when you're trying to load your machine, and then you've got to make sure that the tension's right to keep the wire from jumping off the spool while still being able to feed easily. And I haven't used this wire in quite a while, so I didn't have the settings perfect. Definitely practice on something else if you're going to use this wire. It can be, like I said, extremely difficult to work with, and you don't want to ruin your project the first time you use it. Another downside to the stainless flux core wire is the fact that it is very pricey compared to mild steel. Your mild steel wire is about $20, give or take a couple bucks, for a 2-pound spool. This stainless flux core wire is about $35 for a 1-pound spool. So it's half the amount and almost double the price. So I tend to only use that stainless flux core wire in situations where I absolutely need a rust-free weld, and it's quick. I don't like doing long welds with it. You have to run it too hot and you can really start to melt things. I started to melt these forks back here, and you just really need to pay attention and make sure you are dialed in when you go to use it. So it can definitely be done if flux core is all you have available. However, it is not the best way to do stainless. Something like a TIG welder would be the way to go if you're going to be doing a lot of stainless. It's worth it. It's easier. It looks nicer. You're only going to be able to get this flux core stainless wire to look so nice. The weld's not going to match the stainless as far as shine and stuff like that goes. It's going to be more of a dull gray, and that's just the nature of it. Once again, if you need to do something and the rust on the weld doesn't matter, it's going to be painted, definitely just do it with your regular mild steel wire. If you've got a situation where you need to weld stainless and it needs to be rust free, then the flux core stainless wire is a good way to go without having to buy a whole new machine and gas bottle and that sort of thing. However, just make sure you put in the time and practice. You can tell looking at these that I have not used this wire in a while and was trying to figure out what settings worked best, and it shows in these welds. Now if I would have sat here and used it, a few days in a row or something, I probably could have got a little bit better result. When you're cleaning up your stainless welds, you need to be extremely careful. Stainless shows scratches very easily, and if you're not going to paint it, then you're going to see them. So use something like this brush. This little brush has very fine steel bristles. It's not as stiff, and it's what I used on these, and you can still see some minor scratching. Something like this brush would show some pretty significant scratches. These bristles are a little bit bigger in diameter and they are stiffer. And just it being a bigger brush in general, you can really press down into the metal more, and you're probably not going to be able to get those out of the stainless once you're done. So that's just a couple of things to keep in mind. And like I said, in a pinch, stainless flux wire will get it done, but just be mindful of some of the downsides to using it. If you need some other videos, you can watch this one on a flux core setup under $400. And you can also watch this one on where to get scrap metal cheap or free for practice and some other welding projects.